Okay, let's unpack this because, wow. Imagine waking up to headlines that sound like, well, like something straight out of a geopolitical thriller. You've got an Israeli airstrike taking out top government officials, and then, almost immediately, this dramatic escalation. UN offices raided, aid workers detained. That's literally what just unfolded in Yemen. So here at the deep dive, we're going to try and cut through some of the noise. We're looking at a recent AP News piece that really details the Iran-backed Houthis raid on UN offices in Sana'a, Yemen's capital, and crucially, the events leading right up to it. Our mission today really is to give you the insights to grasp not just what happened, but maybe why it matters and, the wider implications.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating here, I think, and also quite concerning is just how quickly something that seems like a local military action can just ripple outwards. It fundamentally changes the game for humanitarian efforts, for regional stability. This isn't just, things being connected. It feels like it reveals a pretty chilling strategic shift. You've got non-state actors directly challenging, well, the very idea of international aid to exert pressure. We're going to try and connect those dots for you, show why these events in Yemen are so critical to watch right now.
Okay, so even before we get to the UN raids themselves, something really jumped out at me.
Yeah.
The timing, right, and the precision of that Israeli airstrike. It happened just days before those raids.
Yeah.
Thursday, August 28th.
Right.
In Sana'a. And this wasn't just any attack. It was, it was a devastating blow. The consequences for the Houthi rebel-controlled government were immediate, severe, and just deeply destabilizing.
That's absolutely the critical starting point here. If you connect this to the bigger picture, I mean, the sheer number of high-ranking officials taken out in one strike, it really points to a major calculated hit on the Houthi leadership structure. The AP article confirms the strike killed Ahmed al-Warhawi, who was the prime minister of the Houthi-controlled government. But it went much further than just him. It wasn't just losing one leader. The strike essentially wiped out key ministries. You're talking Foreign Minister Gamal Amer, Deputy Prime Minister Mohammed al-Madani, and crucial roles like electricity, tourism, information ministers, all gone. Plus, a really powerful Deputy Interior Minister, Abdelmajid al-Murtada, was also killed. So we're talking about a huge chunk of their top leadership, and they were reportedly targeted during what the Houthis themselves called a routine workshop for performance evaluation. It was just a direct, devastating hit. Right at the heart of their administration, their political setup, it really impacts their ability to govern, to reject any authority, losing so many key figures all at once. That creates a massive vacuum. It's a huge challenge to just keeping things running.
Yeah, it's hard to really get your head around the impact, isn't it, losing that many core figures in one go. For the Houthis, it's not just losing people. It's a massive blow to their operational capacity, their command structure. And it's a huge symbolic challenge to their authority, too. A hit like that, well, it inevitably demands some kind of response. But the way they responded just a few days later, Sunday, September 1st, it was direct, yes, but also deeply troubling. It sort of shifted the focus away from purely military targets onto a, well, much more vulnerable front.
And that's the really critical puzzle, right? Why target humanitarian organizations amidst all this chaos? So right after that Israeli strike, Sunday, September 1st, we see the Iran-backed Houthis. They're the Zaidi Shia rebel group controlling much of northern Yemen. They raided UN agency offices in Sana'a. The article is very specific. The raids hit the World Food Program, WFP, the World Health Organization, WHO, and UNICEF. And then what happened next was even more alarming. Security forces actually entered the premises. They were questioning employees out in the parking lots, trying to get into other UN buildings. And critically, at least 11 UN personnel were detained. Spokespeople like Abir Etefa for WFP and Amar for UNICEF confirmed these detentions. Both agencies are now doing, comprehensive headcounts of their staff in Sana'a and other Houthi areas. This wasn't just a disruption, it was a direct assault on the ability of these organizations to operate safely and deliver life-saving aid. And this is in one of the world's worst humanitarian crises.
Right. And the international condemnation came fast. And it was really unequivocal. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres himself put out a strong statement. He condemned not just the detentions, but also the forced entry into the WFP premises, the seizure of UN property, and the attempts to enter other UN offices too. He demanded their immediate and unconditional release, and that specifically included people detained previously as well. Such a clear message, isn't it? Targeting humanitarian operations, which are supposed to be neutral, impartial, it's just fundamentally unacceptable on the world stage. It really says something when the very top of the UN has to step in so strongly.
Indeed it does. And, to really grasp the gravity of these recent raids, we can't just see it as a simple tit-for-tat reaction, because this isn't actually new. The article describes these raids as the latest move in what it calls a long-running Houthi crackdown against the UN and other international groups working in rebel areas. The Houthis have a documented history here, detaining dozens of UN staff, aid workers, civil society members, even people linked to the U.S. Embassy in Sana'a, which is now closed, of course. Just as an example, back in January, UN operations up in Sa'ada, that's a Houthi stronghold in the north, they were suspended after 8 staffers got detained there. So this pattern, it really suggests a deliberate strategy, not just, a spontaneous reaction.
Okay, so if this is a known pattern, it makes you wonder, are the Houthis just underestimating the international backlash they'll face? Or is this actually a calculated risk they're prepared to take? Does the condemnation from people like Guterres actually have any real deterrent effect in Sana'a? Or is there like a deeper strategic game being played? What's really driving this repeated targeting of aid groups?
That's a really crucial question because it doesn't feel just reactive. It feels like a calculated long-term strategy. It's about asserting sovereignty, asserting control, not just over territory, but over the narrative, over the international response itself. By disrupting aid, they can put pressure on the international community, maybe punish what they see as biases, and even use access as leverage for future talks. They basically turn humanitarian need into a bargaining chip. I mean, in a place like Yemen, where millions depend on aid just to survive, controlling its flow gives them immense power. It lets them show their authority, both to their own people and to outsiders. It sends a clear message. We set the terms here, even for those trying to help. Harsh, but the Houthis seem to be strategically weaponizing the humanitarian presence. They're effectively turning aid workers into pawns in their bigger political and military goals. And that fundamentally changes the risk calculation for all international organizations in conflict zones going forward.
That context is so important. Okay, so beyond this pattern with aid workers, we also need to factor in the Houthis' explicit threats against Israel. What's driving this particular spike in aggression? What are they trying to achieve by escalating things this way, especially given all the other regional dynamics at play?
Well, the article makes it crystal clear. The Houthis have explicitly vowed to escalate attacks on Israel and also on Red Sea shipping. And they link it directly to the Israel-Hamas war. We saw a really tangible and frankly alarming example back on August 21st with that ballistic missile attack. They claimed it was aimed at Ben Gurion Airport near Tel Aviv. And critically, they described it as the first cluster bomb they'd launched at Israel since 2023. Now, cluster bombs, they disperse smaller explosives over a wide area, so that's significant. That attack set off widespread air raid sirens across central Israel, even Jerusalem, millions forced into shelters, so it highlights the serious impact and the reach they now have. Their secretive leader, Abdel Karim al-Houthi, actually stated publicly that their, quote, military approach of targeting the Israeli enemy is continuous, steady, and escalating. He explicitly mentioned missiles, drones, or even a naval blockade. They've even gone so far as to threaten merchant ships doing business with
Right, that threat against merchant shipping, regardless of nationality. That feels particularly chilling. It suggests something broader, maybe more ambitious than just targeting Israel itself. What's the strategic thinking behind putting global trade routes at risk like that?
Exactly. Because beyond the stated reasons, targeting Red Sea shipping isn't just about disrupting Israel. It's actually a very potent geopolitical lever. It elevates the Houthi status on the world stage. Look, the Red Sea is one of the planet's most critical maritime choke points. It connects Europe and Asia. By threatening that route, they put global trade itself at risk. That forces international players, major maritime powers, big economic blocs to engage with the Yemen conflict in ways they might otherwise try to avoid. It dramatically increases the Houthis' leverage. It turns a regional fight into a global economic headache. It's a way for a non-state actor, really, to project power far beyond its borders. It shows they can inflict economic pain and demand attention from a global audience. This strategy lets them frame themselves as a significant regional player, someone capable of impacting international trade and security. And that, of course, increases their bargaining power in any future negotiations.
So when we put it all together, the Israeli strike, the Houthi retaliation against the UN, these broader vows of escalation against Israel and global shipping, what's the big picture message for us, for you listening, about the state of the region right now? This isn't just a series of isolated things happening.
No, and this really brings us to a crucial point about the region's wider stability and the potential, frankly, for a much bigger conflict. The UN envoy for Yemen, Hans Grunberg, expressed great concern over these recent strikes. He specifically called for de-escalation, stating very clearly, Yemen cannot afford to become a battleground for a broader geopolitical conflict. Now, that's not just diplomatic speak. It's a real warning. It's a blueprint for how things could escalate. History shows us again and again when a region as volatile as the Middle East, with all its complex alliances and rivalries, sees one actor draw a new line like attacking the UN or threatening global shipping, it fundamentally changes the risk calculation for everyone else. You can think of historical examples, right? Regional conflicts like the 73 Yom Kippur War or the start of the Syrian civil war. Often, local sparks can ignite much wider proxy battles, pulling in outside powers, creating new, unpredictable alliances. And in Yemen, with its strategic spot right at the mouth of the Red Sea, with existing foreign involvement and the Houthis' strong ties to Iran, that risk is extremely high. These events threaten to turn what was a localized, albeit devastating, conflict into something that could destabilize the entire Middle East. It could potentially pull in global powers and create new flashpoints way beyond Yemen itself.
So you've just had a deep dive into how just one airstrike can set off this chain reaction with really far-reaching consequences. It impacts international aid, regional security, even global shipping. We've seen that direct link. The Israeli strike on Houthi leaders, followed by those deeply troubling raids on UN offices, resulting in at least 11 aid workers being detained. And all of this is happening against a backdrop of escalating Houthi threats against Israel and vital sea lanes. It's a truly sobering thought, isn't it? That in a conflict already so awful, humanitarian efforts become just another battleground, and aid workers become targets.
Yeah, and maybe this leaves us with a critical question to ponder. Considering this pattern we've discussed, targeting humanitarian groups in conflict zones, coupled with this increasing rhetoric of escalation, what are the lasting consequences? For the basic principles of humanitarian neutrality, for the ability of aid agencies to actually deliver critical help in future crises around the world. How does this redefine the rules of engagement for international bodies trying to operate in these incredibly complex geopolitical situations? And maybe what does it ask of us, as a global community in terms of our collective responsibility to protect those delivering aid and ensure that humanitarian access is actually possible?